I had my wrestling match with God when I felt like he was saying this business was no longer right for me. When the driver of the car came up to me and said, Mr. Egg, I'm sorry. And Tim says, I heard Al say, it's okay, Derek, we forgive you. He said, right then, I knew I wanted Jesus in my life. Trust God. No matter what you're going through, that's the key. Trust God.
Thank you for joining Mercy Today. How do mercy and compassion break down barriers and change everything? How do they bring hope? Be inspired as our guests share about the life-changing, soul-impacting work through the ministry of Mercy, Inc. and its partners. Here's your host, Dr. Dan Pritchett.
Well, I'm very glad to have you join us for this episode of Mercy Today Radio. You know what we get to do? We get to tell the story of how compassion changes everything, and it really does. And friends, God is on the move in some amazing ways and some amazing places, and we just continue that story today. We get to tell the story of the great work of Mercy, Inc. and its partners and friends at home and around the world. You know, it occurs to me, and I've heard this over the years as a pastor, that people say God doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. So in other words, He takes us as we are, where we are, and He heads us off in a direction. He prepares and trains us for what He has set out for us to do. And when we first get that nudge, and I've heard this many times in other people's lives, and I know I've experienced too, when God says, this is what I want you to go, this is where the direction I want to lead you, and it's easy to say, no way, how could I ever do that? And yet that's the whole point, because if God called you to do what you were already good at or what you already thought you were champion at doing, then it's going to be more you and less of Him. So He doesn't usually show us the path ahead, but He does call us to trust Him and follow His leading step by step. And then the song comes to mind, Trust and Obey. I love that. I won't sing the solo, but the rest of that line is, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. So I know many people like that, pastors, missionaries, Bible study leaders, committed Christians, who have had that journey, who have trusted and obeyed, and God has done amazing things in and through their lives. So one of them is in the studio with me right now. I want him to tell his story. He thought his life would be heading in a certain direction, and no, God interrupted that and snatched him and set a different path for him. And so now he has a ministry impact on ordinary people, believers and unbelievers, and he has an impact on famous people whose names some of you will know. So looking back at 50 years, is that right, Al?
40 years.
40 years of ministry. And he might be saying, wow, I never saw that coming. So would he say that? Would he say that? Well, let's ask him. So I want to welcome you, friends, to the discussion. Invite you to lean in, listen with your heart, and listen to the end, because we have a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out on the show, and we are going to run out of radio time, so we're going to bridge over to the afterwards, which you'll be able to get on the podcast. So not zooming in, actually, I drove you here.
That's right.
Yeah, picked you up. So in studio today is Al Egg, and he's going to tell his story. He's I had it written down here, a sports chaplain and a Bible study leader and other things we'll learn more about. So again, the episode is Reaching Higher, Going Deeper. Al, thank you so much for coming in today. It was a joy to pick you up at home and spend that almost hour in the car and hearing stories. And I'm glad you're here. And welcome to Mercy Today Radio.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be with you again.
Yes, again, yes. We go back a long ways. We'll touch on some of that a little bit. But so let's jump right into it, Al. I want to get into this with, and I've heard the story a few times, but it's so long ago, even for your experience. How did God call you into the ministry initially?
Okay, I was in the import plywood business in Shelton, Washington.
Yeah.
And then that brought me to Portland, where I was asked to set up an import division of a company here. I did that for 8 years, and then felt like God in the middle of the night in Taipei, Taiwan, in the Grand Hotel.
Wow.
I had my wrestling match with God.
Yeah.
When I felt like He was saying this business was no longer right for me. Not that it was wrong, but it was not right for me. I didn't understand that, but I got out of the business due to an encouraging word from Dave Weyerhaeuser of Weyerhaeuser timber products. I ended up in real estate for 8 years. And then God called me out of that. And I felt the call to full-time ministry in January of 1980, I believe it was. But I had heard somebody say, a pastor in Southern California, a friend gave me a tape of his, and in that he said, there are many men in ministry today. Some were called and some just went. Yeah. And I knew that God could bless either one.
Right.
But I knew he would bless those that are called.
Yeah.
And so I spent 11 months being sure that it was a call. I had to be sure that it was that.
How did you do that?
Well, I had access to a vacant farmhouse, 3-story and basement house.
Oh, wow.
I had access to that because of an interesting development. But I would go there every Wednesday and spend the day fasting, praying, reading the Word, falling asleep, because when you're curled up in a sleeping bag in the middle of the winter, no heat in the building at all, you fall asleep when you're reading the Word sometimes, and that happens. But you wake up and continue. So for 11 months, I did that. And finally, on a Sunday night in November of 1980, in the basement home of Pat and Adeline Tucker, wonderful Christians, we were in their home. I was teaching the home group. And in the midst of that, a young lady in our group, a college student, got to be a nuisance. She was kind of just out of the corner of my eye. And she said, I have to leave. I've got a midterm exam tomorrow. You people don't have that problem, but I can't go until we pray for Al. I hadn't told them what was going on. So we sat on the floor, people gathered around us and began to pray. And then she started to pray, and suddenly her voice changed. Said, yea, my son, now is the hour, now is the time. If you will but begin to place your feet upon the path that I've set before you, I will go before you and prepare the way. Your treasure lies beneath the mountain.
Oh, man.
And right then I turned to my wife and I said, honey, that's it. There's no turning back. I said, yes, Lord, I'll be available to athletes and coaches. That's what I'd heard. Yeah. I didn't understand it, but that's what I'd heard.
Oh, man. What a story. I don't think I've heard that part of the story before.
Yeah.
Thank you. Would you recommend an approach similar to that? I mean, like getting away, if somebody feels like maybe they are sensing a call to ministry.
See, I was blessed to have the opportunity and a place to do that. But yes, if you can get away and just be alone with God and get in the Word and maybe even fasting and whatever, but spend that alone, that quiet time with God. And that's hard for me. Yeah. It's hard for me to shut up and let God speak. Yeah. But we need that.
Wow. So you've had an impact, Al, on the well-known and the not-so-well-known. And my observation of you, and as I said kind of on the intro, that the not-so-well-known are my friends of my dad's generation at our church. And you don't have a Lutheran background, but you took these Lutheran men, met them at Village Inn, was it, for I don't know how many years, every Tuesday or I forget
Tuesday
the details.
Morning.
And I know some of these guys, and they're dying off. A lot of them have graduated, gone on to heaven, and they're in their, those who are alive are in their 90s.
Oh, yes.
But the fact that you would spend one evening down at the Trailblazer facility, it was the Memorial Coliseum back in the day for those of you around here, but and talk to and have chapel for some of the well-known athletes. And then on Tuesday, you'd show up for these nobodies, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, and you just hung in there and did that. So what do you find that these guys all have in common? The not-so-well-known and the well-known.
The same thing that everyone has in common. We all were born with a God-shaped vacuum inside. And we're trying to fill that void or that vacuum with all kinds of things. Yep. And because it's God-shaped, only God can fill it.
Exactly.
So until we come to that realization and say, Jesus, I need you in my life, I want you in my life, that fills the void.
Yeah.
Nothing else will.
Yeah, exactly. And no matter what station you are in life, no matter your age or your accomplishments or anything else, that void is still there.
Absolutely.
So what happens, Al, in a person's life when that God-shaped void gets filled?
Well, then they have new direction. They have a peace that they never had before, an understanding maybe that they never had before, but the peace for sure is there, and they want to go deeper with that.
Yeah. I think you're kind of a single-minded guy. And notice I said single, not simple, because you're complicated or complex, and you understand a lot of things about how God works in people's lives. But I think you've probably had a singular focus. What has been your prayer and your focus for all the people that you have been in ministry situations with, in Bible studies or speaking or on your radio show? What's your focus?
To fulfill the purpose that God has for each and every one of us. And that's 2 Peter 5:7, I believe. I could be wrong on the address, but it's that none should perish, but that all should have everlasting life.
Exactly. And that has driven your life for all these 40 years.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break. We will be right back with Al Egg. Don't go away.
I'm Brad Swinford with Salem Concrete Paving. It's a privilege to partner with Mercy, Inc., who provides hope to people around the world by meeting critical needs and introducing people to Jesus. I know that through Mercy, Inc., I'm investing in God's kingdom as they spread the love and gospel of Christ around the world. So please join me in supporting Mercy, Inc. and Mercy Today Radio by praying or going to their website at MercyToday.global. Thank you.
This is Doug Hoffman, the Executive Director for Mercy, Inc. I want to introduce you to our Mercy Minutes. Our desire is to be the hands and feet of Jesus through compassion and empowerment. I go to Matthew 25, verses 35 and 36. It says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. And I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Mercy wants to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We want to be able to reach out to other people, people that are hurting around the world, as Jesus reached out to them. Then he was able to teach them, and they were able to understand what he was saying. And that is the desire, again, of Mercy, Inc.
Now's the time to become a part of something greater in our community. You and your organization can partner with Mercy Today and change the lives of thousands around the world. Our team of business professionals can also come alongside you and help you grow your organization to maximize your impact. Our goal is to help you increase your quadruple bottom line: people, planet, profit, and purpose. Consider being a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at MercyToday.global.
We are back with Al Egg, sports chaplain, Bible study leader, and I could go on and on about things about Al, but that would take the rest of the show, so we're going to jump right back into it. I asked Al about his prayer and focus for all the people that he has ministered with and to and among, and he said helping people to fill that God-shaped vacuum, and that's what he's been doing in a variety of different ways and places globally, and a lot of recognition right here in our Portland area, because Al was the chaplain for our local Portland Trailblazers professional NBA team, and held the chapel, and that's where he met some of the big names, some of the well-known athletes. But Al, I want to take us back a little ways, because and it's a how do I say, it's a tender time. I mean, your daughter was killed in a car crash,
Right.
And what I want to take from that, because a few years after that, my son was killed in a plane crash.
Exactly.
And you spoke at the 6-month anniversary at his high school, the 6-month mark after his death. And so we're bonded together. We got dragged into that club that no parent ever wants to join. But what I want to pick out of there is, at his memorial service, if I understood the details, the driver of that car.
My daughter's memorial.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. When she was in junior high school, she came home one day and said, "Mom, there's this really nice boy at school, and sometimes we sit together at lunch. And when we do, we always end up talking about God. But Mom, he doesn't know God." Well, he was in my FCA group, Tim Kangas, and he was standing next to me. This is his testimony. He sends it to me every now and then. He was standing next to me at her memorial service when the driver of the car came up to me and said, "Mr. Egg, I'm sorry. And Tim says, "I heard Al say, 'It's okay, Derek, we forgive you.'" He said, right then I knew I wanted Jesus in my life. So he did accept Christ. He went on to Houghton College in upstate New York, where he was an All-American soccer player, met his wife Jenny there. They went to England in a ministry with soccer and prisons for about 5 years. And for the past 25 plus years, they've been church planters in Cambodia.
Yeah. And I guess what I want to say to our listeners is you never know what God is going to work out of an event, a tragic event or a redirection of some kind, an illness or a diagnosis or a death or something. So, and I want our listeners to hear that, because if you have had some struggles, had some difficulties, some loss, some stress over something, God is at work, and He's going to do something through that. Thank you, Al, for sharing that. Now, he's been planting churches in Cambodia. That's a rough sledding.
Oh, yes. If you plant a church every couple of years, you've had some success, because it's a totally Buddhist country. And when a Cambodian accepts Christ, it costs them. Yeah. They lose their family. They lose the community. Yeah. They're ostracized. They're criticized. They're condemned. It's terrible. Yeah. But Tim just hangs in there with them.
And that is the case in many of the places where Mercy, Inc. is working, in Muslim countries and others where there is persecution. And you pay the price. Yeah. You pay the price. And I don't want to get into it, Al, but I just want people to consider that moment when you and Tim had that conversation, everything that unfolded after that. And I can tell my stories about the loss of my son and how that has had an impact, put me in a different position as a pastor when I'm helping somebody who has lost a loved one. And I just have a knowing about that, a familiarity with that. So there's a lot to get into there. And I want our listeners to hear you say that, that it's not a matter of whether we count the cost or whether it was, quote, worth it or not. That's really not the point. It is God intervenes. He allows things to happen. I'm preaching, aren't I? And I am a preacher, so bear with me. Yes. So everybody taps their watch and say, "Are you about done, brother?" So do you know anything more about that ministry in Cambodia?
No, we're in monthly contact. We support Tim and Jenny every month. We get their newsletter every month, and when he comes home on furlough, as missionaries do, he comes to my Thursday morning Bible study weekly, and so we're in close contact with them. Talk on the phone occasionally, but I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about that prophetic word that we got. Yeah. Part of it was, "Your treasure lies beneath the mountain." Yeah. I didn't understand that at all. Right. But one day, a young man who was going to Western Washington University playing basketball, he was a Sunset High School alum, had been in my FCA groups. He had a situation at home where it was not good for him to stay at home on vacation, so he'd stay at our house. And one day he showed up, coming home for Christmas vacation. He had stopped at Saturday Market downtown Portland and bought us a Christmas gift. And it was a picture of Portland with Mount Hood in the background. Yeah. And when my wife saw it, she said, "That's it." I said, "That's what?" She said, "The mountain. Our treasure lies beneath the mountain." God was telling us that our treasure is this city. Yeah. Wow. Well, then sometime after that, I got a call one day from John Warehouse in Los Angeles, who was the chaplain of the Dodgers, the Rams, and the Angels, asking me if I would come and take over his ministry because he was going to take a church. And he talked with my wife first, and she said, "Well, you can ask him, but I don't think so because," and she told him. And so when he asked me, I said, "I'm sorry, John, my treasure is this city, not Los Angeles." And, it would have been easy to jump at that. I mean, the Dodgers, the Angels, the Rams. But
right.
This is our city. This is where our treasure is. Yeah. God made that clear.
And you're still here. How long did you chaplain for the Blazers?
Well, first I was the Portland Beavers for 33 years.
Okay.
That was Beavers, Rockies, Beavers.
Baseball team.
Yeah. And then the Blazers for 35 years.
Okay, yeah.
And then Portland State football for 40 years. That just ended this last fall.
You've been busy under the mountain here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to take a detour here, Al. Can you tell a story about a well-known, somebody that most people would hear, they would know their name, and some encounter that you had that either was inspirational for you because maybe they didn't live out, their Christian testimony publicly, or a conversation or something that encouraged you, an athlete, a well-known athlete?
Michael Thompson, the former Blazer, was key in my doing the Blazers. He asked me to do a Bible study, and we held it at Mountain Park Church because he lived in the apartments across the street from there. So we used their fireside room and had Bible study. Well,
And he was a key player on the team.
Yes, he was a key player. And the next year, Kelvin Ramsey was a rookie.
Okay.
And he was coming to the Bible study. And one day he said, Al, can we do chapel? Well, I said, well, of course, we can do it every Sunday like we do in baseball and football. He said, no, I want it every game.
Every home game.
Every home game.
Yep.
And so I said, well, if we can get approval. So he went to Jack Ramsey. And Jack said, that's a very good idea. I'll get you a room. So Jack provided the room. And Kelvin started coming to the Bible study. We started doing chapel. We know that we think the second or third team in the entire league to have a chapel program. We were the first team to do it every home game.
Yeah, wow.
And now everybody.
And Ramsey was the head coach at that time.
Yes, Jack was the head coach. Okay, quick story on Jack. One time he took $1,000 out of the players' fine fund and donated it to my ministry.
Oh, wow.
Well, he had to tell the players what he was doing.
Yeah.
So the next game, Kiki Vandeweghe and Clyde Drexler came to me together and said, Al, we want you to know most of that's our money. Because nobody got fined more than those two players.
Yeah, right. Well, people in this region will hear those, understand those names, and remember them. And so, speaking of your ministry, I love it. It's Beyond Victory. Tell us about that.
Well, it's just God gave it to me, and beyond the victory, there's more to life than winning a ball game or winning a position in your work or anything else. There's more to life than the victory. Beyond victory is what God.
Yeah. So we all want to be winners. We want to have victories in our life. But what just the word of your ministry says it all, because there is more beyond, in addition to. It doesn't mean that we don't want to strive, don't want to win, don't want to be on the top of things, particularly men. You know, we're competitive. We want to be the best at whatever it is we're doing. But there's something beyond that. I love that.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to have some things in our afterwards, so we want our listeners to cue in and get ready for some additional ones. But and I'm going to go to our next question, but we might want to backtrack a little bit. If any story or anything comes to mind, I'd like you to jump in with that. So people in our age and stage, you and me and some of our listeners, we find that we have to make adjustments in life. In fact, why don't you tell about the wonder years before we even started?
Well, I finally reached the wonder years. I wonder where my car is.
Yeah.
I wonder where my cell phone is.
Right.
I wonder where I'm going. I wonder what I'm doing here. How did we end up here?
Yeah, exactly. And where I'm going with that is as we get older, we have to say goodbye to certain things that we have treasured and loved and wanted for a long time. And so you lost the privilege of driving.
Yes.
And so tell us about how you have adjusted because now, I mean, you can't go back.
No.
You can't get that again. So, but what an extraordinary adjustment you have to make to carry on your ministry or adjust or change or something.
Yeah, I've lost my independence.
Yeah.
And I have to depend upon my wife or friends to get me where I need to be whenever. And I had a minor rear end accident. And my daughter and my deputy sheriff's son decided that I should not drive anymore.
Oh, okay.
So the government didn't take my license away. My family grounded me.
Yeah.
And
so I've had ministry in a lot of seniors in my churches, and that's a horrible day, particularly for men.
Yes.
When they say, Dad, turn the keys over. You can't drive safely anymore. You're a danger to everybody else, too. Yeah. So how did you adjust that? I mean, you know, was it kind of the grief, anger and
It happened a week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So at our Thanksgiving dinner table, I said, after I'd prayed, I said, listen, and you need to know that when you took my driving privileges away, that was the worst thing you have ever done to me. But I've had time to think about it.
Yeah.
And now I believe I can say it was probably the best thing you've ever done for me. Wow. Thank you for doing it.
Good words. Wow. What would you say to people who are going through similar adjustments by necessity, things that they have to surrender or give up because they can't do them anymore?
Trust God.
Okay, yeah.
No matter what you're going through, that's the key. Trust God. He is still on the throne. He is still in control. It sure doesn't look like it in our country right now, but God is God, and He's always going to be there for us.
Yeah. you had the blessing of having a real sense of calling and purpose in your life at that time. We have been talking with Al Egg, sports chaplain, Bible study leader, et cetera, and I want you to know that if you would like to be in touch with Al or have questions about this ministry, then get in touch with us. Go to MercyToday.global and just go to the contact page. Help us understand what you'd like to have, and we'll send any questions or connections on to Al. And Al, you're okay with that? You can respond and pray for people, and yeah. All right. So that's it, Al. I just want to thank you so much. And because you can't drive, I picked you up. That was a great conversation in a car. Thank you very much. So thanks for coming in and being a part of Mercy Today Radio.
Thank you.
And folks, we are going to hear more from Al in the afterwards portion. So stay tuned.
How do you multiply your time, talent, and treasures? By investing in Mercy Today. Whether it's going on a mission outreach halfway around the world or sharing your insights and experiences with others in our local community, our team of business professionals can help you multiply what God has given you. We can help you grow your organization so that you and your fellow work associates can utilize your talents for even greater causes as you multiply your resources to do even more. Join us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at MercyToday.global. Have you been looking for new ways to grow your organization and have a lasting, eternal impact? Mercy Today has an amazing team of business professionals that have managed small businesses to large corporations, and we want to share that know-how and experience with you. We're also committed our lives to sharing the gospel with compassion and serving the practical needs of communities around the world. Partner with us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at MercyToday.global.
This is Doug Hoffman, Executive Director for Mercy, Inc. Just thanking you for listening to MercyToday.global.
Well, we had such a great time talking to Al Egg, and you may want to replay that. A lot of treasures in there, a lot of really, really good and important things. Again, I'll say if you have questions about the topic or the guest today, please let us know. Go to MercyToday.global. If you are interested in a short-term mission trip, or if you're interested in any of the partners that Mercy works with, we'd love to hear from you. Again, just go to our contact page at MercyToday.global and let us know what's on your mind. I want to thank you for listening today. This is Mercy Today Radio. We get to tell the story of how compassion changes everything. God is on the move around the world and right here at our area and in your area. So I am your host, Dr. Dan Critchett, wrapping up this episode. And until next time, may God help you be a part of what He is doing in our world today. Join us again for another show on the radio or on the podcast. Go to MercyToday.global. I want to say God bless your friend. I hope you've taken some good things away. Goodbye for now. So we had a great conversation with Al Egg, and now we are into the afterwards. So we turn off the studio clock here, and we have additional time. Several things that we want to talk about with Al, who is still here in the studio, and we want really for this to be a blessing in your life, not just to say, oh, that's an interesting story, or yeah, I see what God is doing in other people's lives. What I would really hope for you, listener, is that you would take from this and see that God is tapping you for a deeper involvement, because the title of this episode was, and still is, Reaching Higher, Going Deeper. And that's our prayer for you, all of us in the studio right here, asking God to touch your life in that kind of a way. But here's some more stories of local interest here. Our NBA team, the Portland Trailblazers, there was a guy on the team, Michael Thompson, and Al has a couple things that will show God's working in his life and maybe some inspiration for the rest of you too.
Well, Michael, since he retired from the NBA, has been the radio voice of the Lakers doing the color there. But I knew how his career had ended. I had Michael come and speak. I have 2 fundraisers a year, a luncheon at the Mac Club and a golf tournament. We didn't do them last year at all, obviously, but I had Michael come and speak to that. And so I'm interviewing him, and at the end I said, Michael, tell us how your career ended, because I knew the story. And he had 1 year left on his contract for $1.8 million. And he knew that it was just going to be garbage minutes on a bad game, and he didn't
And this
want
was still with the Blazers?
No, he was with this was with the Lakers.
Oh, as a player?
As a player.
Oh, okay.
So he went to Jerry West, and he said, Jerry, I don't want to have garbage minutes at the end of a bad game. Can we work something out? So Jerry came back to him and said, Michael, we'll buy you out for $900,000. Well, Michael agreed, and then he got a gig in Italy for $900,000. So he wasn't out anything. So he goes to Italy. He leads that team to the playoffs. They'd never been there before. They lost in the first round. They gave him his final check, $210,000, and he came home. The check bounced. So he's communicating across the ocean with them. Finally, he gave up, and he flew to Italy and confronted them, and they apologized. They were really sorry. They gave him a new check. He came home, and that bounced.
Oh, no.
And he never got the money.
Oh.
So I had him at my luncheon, and I had him tell that story. And then we sat down at our dinner table, and people were eating, and my wife whispered something to me. I said, yes. And I got my checkbook out, and I wrote a check for $210,000 to Michael Thompson. I didn't sign it, but I handed it to him.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to fall out of his chair. Terry Porter was sitting next to him. He showed it to Terry, and Terry's cracking up. And then Michael put it in his pocket. He said, Al, this is my souvenir. I can't wait to go home and show Julie our second bogus check.
Oh, man, that's good. And so that's the story of how his career ended.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's doing color for the Lakers now.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of sports, we'll do one more sports story, and that is about, I'll just say the name Pat Casey, and you can fill in the blanks.
Okay, well,
by the way, people that listen to this, either real time or because we have stations in other parts of the country, and a podcast, can be anywhere. So you bear with us, listeners, because we're going to do some local shop talk here. So, but the story, the relevance of the story is still very good.
I had a one-on-one fellowship relationship with Ed Stevens, who was the president of George Fox College. So we were having lunch one day, and Ed said, Al, it was July. I still remember that. And he said, Al, I've got to hire a coach. It's only a part-time job, but I need to hire a coach. And do you know anybody? I said, coaching what? And he said, baseball. I said, Ed, in baseball chapel, I have 2 chapel leaders on the team. And one of my chapel leaders with the Portland Beavers just got released. His career is over. He lives in Newburgh, home of George Fox College.
Yeah.
He's sitting there studying for the real estate exam. And he said, I'd love to talk to him. So at home, I called and I said, Case, you interested in coaching? He said, well, I never thought about it. What do you got? And I told him, and he said, I'll talk to him. So I got them together, and Ed Stevens hired Pat Casey as his baseball coach at George Fox. He was there, I think, 7 years, and then went to Oregon State, where he won 3 national championships. And that's a God story. Only God could orchestrate that and put it together.
And that's the benefit here. That's the value that I want everybody for us to look at and to hear. God works in mysterious ways, is kind of the old saying, but it's so true. He works in ways that we may not understand, or when the event or the opportunity comes, we may not know how it all fits together or where it might lead. We're back to trust and obey.
Yeah.
And because God is in it, He's doing some amazing things. Through Mercy, Inc., some fabulous projects and partners that are at work around the globe in some key areas and some key meeting human needs. And then so, Mercy and others step in and meet those needs, build relational connections, bring the gospel across, do discipleship and church planting. And God is at work making the best of so many different opportunities. They're not all negative. They're not all heartbreakers. Some of them are just open doors, like the story that you just told. So, I want to bridge a little bit out of... Let
me just throw something in.
Sure.
God works in our lives even when we don't know Him.
Exactly.
And that's what He did for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know you could have. And yet He asked me, or got me to work with kids.
Yeah.
I was asked to be the youth leader in my church. And I had some athletes in that group. And I heard about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and their summer camp. And so I went to the camp for a couple of days to check it out and see if it was worth sending my kids to. And it was there that I heard the gospel for the very first time.
Yeah.
And I look back and I know that gospel had been presented I just didn't hear it because my spiritual ears were not open to the truth.
Absolutely.
And when that happens, the word just goes right over the top of you.
Yeah.
But I heard it there, and the man who led me to the Lord was Frosty Westering, who was the head football coach at Pacific Lutheran University at the time, and one of the greatest men I've ever known. He's home with the Lord now, but Frosty, and he had 100 Frostyisms, we called them.
Yeah.
But the one that stands out most, and it was the title of his book, is Make the Big Time Where You Are. It doesn't have to be playing football at USC or Stanford or Oregon. It can be at PLU or George Fox or wherever. You make the big time where you are.
Yeah, I like that. Key point there is that God is working in a person's life, even if they don't know Him or don't know that He's doing that work.
Right.
I think that's so critical. But because people that listen to this show typically are Christ followers, they're believers, even out on the fringe. But if that's you, listener, just understand that the circumstances that you're worried about right now, or praying for, or wondering about, God is at work. And if you are praying about a family member or a loved one or a friend that doesn't seem to know the Lord, just understand that God is at work in their lives too.
Amen.
And some fantastic things are going to happen. Al, you've had this 40-year ministry career, tremendous blessing that you have been to so many, and yet you remember the time when you first came to faith, and that God orchestrating all of the connections and the relationships to set that up and to make it possible. And as they say, the rest is history. And here you are today, blessing our audience with these words. So if we can get out of the sports world for a minute, we're going to talk, and I don't want to say the political word, I want to say communication.
Yes.
And so if you're listening to this podcast, this will be sort of anchored to a particular time frame, and we try not to get locked into that. But we have experienced the death of Rush Limbaugh. Now, whether you love him or hate him, you laugh at him or criticize him or whatever, we want to know something about, because Rush was not overt with his expression of his Christian faith, but you have a story to tell and a background about Rush and his faith. So tell us that.
Well, one of the men in one of my Bible studies, when he read that Rush had died, remembered hearing Rush make a statement on his radio show at one time that he had just accepted Christ. And so this man said, I know it had to be his brother David, a very strong Christian. And he texted that to our group, and I texted right back and said, no, it wasn't David. It was the late Pastor Ken Hutcherson of Seattle that led Rush to the Lord. So I dug out one of Hutch's books, Enough Faith, and Ken Hutcherson was I got to tell this about Hutch. He grew up in Alabama, and he played football in high school and college for one purpose: to beat up on white people illegally.
Yeah.
And that's why he played. Well, he was good enough that he got drafted into the NFL. He had a short career because of a knee injury that ended it, but he ended in Seattle, and he somehow ended up then being the youth pastor at Westminster Chapel in Bellevue. And he was so dynamic in his personality and his charisma and everything else that after he'd been there just not even a year, I don't think, my wife and I went up to see Hutch in his church. His youth group occupied 9 classrooms. 9 classrooms just for the senior high youth group. He was that dynamic. And then he started his own church, Antioch Bible Church in Kirkland, Washington.
Okay, yeah.
And I dug out a book of Hutch's, and he dedicated this book. I want to read the dedication. He says, in memory of one of my greatest disciples, David Brown, one of the original Seattle Seahawks who went to be with our Lord in January 2006. He was a man that lived fully the faith that he already had and influenced more men to walk with Christ as he did. And that caught my attention because I knew Dave Brown. And the first time I met David Brown, it was at a Pro Athletes Outreach football conference in San Diego in 1978. And on Saturday morning of that conference, and they did this at all the PAO conferences, I later served as a volunteer staff member for their conferences for 29 years. But at every conference on Saturday morning, they had somebody teach how to use the 4 Spiritual Laws booklet. And most Christians are familiar with that.
Sure.
And So we're doing the teaching session. I'm sitting next to Dave Brown, and it comes time to practice this. So I turn to him and going to do it with him, and somebody taps me on the back and says, my father wants me to do this with you. So Dave had to find somebody else. Eddie Waxer had brought 3 sports writers from Chile and Argentina to the conference to expose them to Pro Athletes Outreach and what it was. One of them had a son as a cook in Portland, Maine, flew him to San Diego to be their translator. And that was who tapped me on the back and said, my father wants me to do this with you. I'd never seen the 4 laws before. I'm learning, and this is a practice session.
Yeah.
And that young man prayed to receive Christ. Well, I found out later Dave Brown prayed to receive Christ right then at the same time with whoever he was working with. But Dave Brown, I just got to share this about Dave. I absolutely love this man. He died in 2006 playing basketball with other coaches at Texas Tech University. And I went to Seattle for his memorial service, and I will never forget what I heard. His son, Sterling, he had 2 boys, Sterling and Spencer, I believe, and they were about 19, 20, somewhere in there. Sterling stood up and he said this. He said, don't worry about us. We're going to be just fine because our dad made sure that we know Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a great parting testimony. Yeah.
I mean, we all need to have that in our life.
So I'm going to close with our last question here, because it kind of bridges in from where we've been. And that is, you've added a special request to your daily prayer life. And I think our listeners will really benefit by hearing it, and maybe they can adopt the same things.
And I only do it in my morning devotion, or not only do it in my morning devotions, but I do it several times through the day.
Yeah.
And it's just this. I say, Lord, today I want what you want more than I want what I want.
And that's so powerful, because the human nature in us, we want all kinds of other things, and they may be fine things, may be good things, but they may not be what God desires for us. Yeah. And so that's a beautiful application. And so, listener, we have been talking to Al Egg, sports chaplain, Bible study leader, and I'll just add, storyteller. Yes. Reaching higher, going deeper. This is the afterwards portion, and we're going to wrap it up here. But I just want you to know that we are doing these shows. We do them continuously. They're on our website. You can go and listen to the podcast, dial them up, and listen to your heart's content. You can binge listen, right, to Al Egg and all the other great guests that we've had. So this was the afterwards portion. We're going to sign off for now. God bless you and keep you close. And may, again, as I sign off on the radio portion, may God help you be a part of what He is doing in our world. So God bless you. See you next time.